All right, mic check, I'm good. So I'm Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding Podcast. Today we have a really cool guest, Welding Podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association Podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and as always, we're looking to bring you the best guests we can find. And today I have a wonderful gentleman who has been around for a long time, and I've seen him here and there and all over the place over the last few years. Ray Lemieux from UA Canada. Ray, how are you doing?
Well, I'm doing great today, Max, and thanks again for having me on. It's a passion of mine talking about the welding industry, so this should be a fun session.
Well, and that's one of the things that's where we keep running into each other, is that we both are out there, flogging welding and trying to get people excited about welding and to join welding, and and the future of welding, which is very, can be a scary conversation right now, depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah, when as you and I have talked many times across Canada, there's so many different rules and regulations and different things governing how welding is done and who can do it and whatnot. So for young people, it's definitely a navigating chore to figure that all out. So
It is
here to help.
Yeah, no, and that's where we're gonna get to. But let's start at the start. That's where we want to go. And let's start with where you are right now. Where are you sitting? Where are you calling in from?
So today I'm sitting in my home office, which has been 90% of where I've spent the last couple of years, thanks to our circumstances. But yeah, so I work from home. I work for the UA Canada, as I mentioned. When I'm not in my home office, I'm traveling across North America, specifically Canada, but trying to help out locals across Canada on their welding initiatives.
And where is your home office? Which city are you in?
Oh, sorry, yeah. I'm outside Kitchener-Waterloo, a little town called Nithberg outside of Wellesley. It's basically Mennonite country, so a lot of horse and buggies, and they don't necessarily understand that you got to go to school for welding.
Well, it sounds beautiful. It sounds very picturesque. And where?
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
It's
Where were you born? Where does the story of Ray start?
so I was born in Kitchener-Waterloo.
Oh.
Spent my childhood up in Southampton, Ontario, on the shores of Lake Huron, and then I moved back to Kitchener when I was 15. So that's where basically my welding career sort of took off from there.
Yeah, so you've been in this area the vast majority of your life.
Yeah, Southern Ontario, born and raised, basically.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's awesome. Now, you said at 15 you got bit by the welding cupid. The welding cupid stabbed you in the butt with his arrow. What were you doing at that time? 15 years old, you're in high school. What put welding in front of you?
well, so it actually, the interest in welding started earlier than that, but
Mm-hmm.
I moved to Kitchener in like I said, grade 10. I did take welding in grade 9 up in Saugeen District Secondary School up in Port Elgin. And, that's where I kind of got exposed to it, so to speak. And then when I moved to the city, Kitchener-Waterloo, I went to a school called Cameron Heights Collegiate. And back then in the early, I guess not the early, but in the 80s, the school still had really, really good tech programs. So, and the school I went to was a very tech-orientated high school. So that's when I got enrolled in welding there in grade 10, and then the instructor there was so good, industrial orientated, and it just took me from there. And I took 9, 10, 11, and 12 welding courses. So
you were already bought into the welding program. Now, your parents at that time, were they looking at you saying, Ray, you're gonna have to go to university when you're done high school? Or were they saying, this kid seems to like welding, he's just going to go with this?
I was lucky enough that my parents didn't push me one way or another. Obviously, college was more the road I was going to go no matter what. It wasn't going to be university, but so I did. So college was the route, but for the welding side of things, I had three uncles in the trade as welders, and they're the ones that sparked my interest. Growing up as a young kid, and then my dad just allowed me to excel for whatever I wanted. What I believed I was good at. So that was great to have that support.
So then, out of high school, did you enroll in a college program for welding, or did you, look towards the unions right out of high school? What was the path then?
No, actually, the union side wasn't really on my radar. Um, I don't think back then in high school, that sort of sector was pushed as much,
Yeah.
so to speak. Other trades, we had people come in. I remember being in, grade 11 and grade 12, and we're trying to think what we want to do. And industry people would come in and talk to us and suggest, what is available for welding, but they sure didn't talk about the piping industry. And the career that was available then. But for myself, I did go off to college. My teacher recommended it. There was 4 of us, I think, in my graduating year that went to Conestoga College for the WET program, the Welding Engineering Technician program. So that's what I did when I first came out of high school.
It's amazing. I don't know what it's going on with Conestoga, but I've probably have like a 10% ratio on this show of people that have gone through the Conestoga program. It has pumped through a lot of great talent. It really has.
I got nothing good, nothing but good things to say about the program, But for me personally, I couldn't see myself sitting here in a shirt. To be honest, I was more of the welding clothes kind of person, and I think personally, if there would have been a different road, I might have went for it. But Ontario back then, unless you were into metal fabricating, there wasn't really apprentice opportunities for welding.
Yeah.
So I went that route because my teacher explained to me about the theory end of it, the metallurgy, and all the different stuff that WET program delivered. Plus, it was close to home. It was so good for us to be close to home, to drive 30 minutes up the highway to Guelph campus, and you're at school, right? So
Yeah.
But for me personally, great program. But with my high school background, 5 years at high school,
You want to be
let's
on the
just say
tools. Yeah.
I wanted to experience, not have that knowledge and all that information, but to actually experience it firsthand and to learn that end of it better. So, and that's how I kind of, got into the welding side of things. But it was tough. It was tough in those the 90s to get jobs.
Well, it's interesting because like I started welding in 90. Let's see, it would have been 92. I think I started welding, and I'm in Saskatchewan. We have a little bit different setup for welding and for the trades out here than in Ontario. But even to this day, I hear that it's sometimes hard to find just a pure welding program. Not something that's tied to inspection or to tie or to other forms of the welding industry, but just welding. Where you go in and you get your level 1 apprenticeship and you start down the path of becoming a welder. And it sounds like in your day, when you started, that was even back then still a thing in Ontario. And you and I sit in meetings now where they're struggling in Ontario to figure out how to bump apprenticeship. And it's like, well, it sounds like you guys haven't been paying attention to apprenticeship for 40 years. Kind of tough to just bump it up now,
Yeah. True, that for sure. And for me, to be honest, I got a job in the manufacturing, for the welding. From college, I was going to school during the day, and I was working evenings at seating manufacturer, Lear Seating, and manufacturer car seats. So I was doing that nights as a production MIG welder. And, obviously that put some money in the pocket to pay for schooling. But the best thing that ever happened, and my dad probably, wishes it didn't, but it got slow in the manufacturing, obviously,
Mm-hmm.
and you get laid off because you're low man on the totem pole on seniority. So I got laid off, and I actually got out of the welding field for just over a year, and I apprenticed to be a bricklayer.
Oh, interesting. Were you any good?
Luckily for me though, my wife decided she wanted to move to White Rock, BC. So we moved to White Rock, BC, and it was kind of like, geez, there's not much work out here for bricklayers with all the, how they build out in
Yeah.
BC, and obviously the rain and all that stuff, and that's how I got back into the welding field. And I worked for a small shop doing ornamental iron work, and just myself and the owner. Great, because I got to do all the things that maybe an apprentice should be doing. Small company, lots of tools, lots of equipment, lots of things to learn.
You have to know
And
how
he-
to
he
use
helped
everything
me-
in that shop, right?
Exactly, right. And and it was nice. It was neat work, right? It was neat work doing that stuff. But I moved home, and then I got lucky.
So let's get back to White Rock. My parents lived in Richmond. My dad used to work for Nelson Mining out there, building mining equipment. And there's what you say about the trades in on the West Coast is very true. It's very specific. There's certain industries that hit and certain industries that don't. So at this point, out in White Rock, you're working as an ornamental. You're picking up skills. You're learning the tools. You're also probably learning a little bit about business because when you work in a small shop like that, you have to be very conscientious of, waste, not overbuying, not overbuilding, not overselling, all these things that you learn about business. And how long were you doing that before you ended up leaving Vancouver or the lower mainland area?
Yeah, so we were there for just not quite a year.
Okay.
Let's just say my wife got homesick and wanted to come home. So, but the funny thing was when I went out there, they were looking for, I think, a certain class of welder, which was a designation for the province of BC, which, obviously I'm a year removed from college or whatever it is, or 2 years. And I have no idea, but I'm just, I tell the owner I can weld. I can do this, just like all welders say, right?
Mhm.
But the cool thing about working in that shop was learning about time management. As a young person, I was just probably like a lot of just getting there on time, or every day was a struggle. Traffic light here and a traffic light there, but so that's what I really learned from that, more so than the business. I mean, the business side, obviously, when you have the owner who's out there getting the work, bringing back to shop drawings, you're building things for him, and the trust of actually, doing a day's work.
Mhm.
And maybe they'd look at it today that the health and safety, what are you doing, working by yourself so much, right? But to me, it was a great experience. You didn't have anybody looking over your shoulder. You had a lot of trust, but like I said, I had to learn about getting on time. I had never had issues with staying extra for them.
Yeah.
Every day the shift probably finished at 4, and I probably never left until 20 after. 20 after 4, 4:30 every day, just to try to get the jobs in and out of the shop, right? But it was more important for him that I got there on time than it was.
And for all the
What
young
time I
people
left.
listening, heed the warning. You must be there. I
Exactly.
would say half hour early. I'm bad. Like I like being early because I'm a shoot the guy, right? I like to get there, get my coveralls on, have a coffee. At that time when I was younger, I'd have a smoke with the guys, and then kind of talk about the job. Oh yeah, where'd you end off yesterday? Where was night shift? Blah blah blah. And I find that that's very important in having a good start to the day.
Oh, absolutely. And it is, for me, the shop was in Langley, BC, so I had to make the drive in, which wasn't far, but it seemed like it rained every day and it was foggy every day, and you never know what you're going to encounter, right? But the thing I liked about working there, and it was all the different things, you're building stuff, and then there's some ornamental stuff, but was just the equipment and learning the skills that um, the owner had. And there's things that I learned from him that I thought I'd already knew, but obviously in welding, it takes a long time to learn all the little tricks. And and some of the equipment obviously was not like it is today, where it's a lot more user friendly, so to speak.
Yeah, when one piece of equipment is actually has about 30 purposes if you jig it right. So
Yeah, exactly.
so
Exactly.
so then let's walk down the path. You get out of White Rock, you head back home to your Kitchener Waterloo area. Where did you land? You're with your were you guys married already? Were you with like your this is your wife? Or you guys still boyfriend girlfriend?
Yeah,
What happened there?
yeah, we're still boyfriend and girlfriend, I guess. Yeah. So this was 1990. We moved back from BC, and basically we both took the summer off. We had a house out there. We sold a house, and we thought obviously that was before everything took off in BC, but we did okay.
Mhm.
And we thought we'd take the summer off and enjoy things, and we tried to do a health business as well.
What kind of health business? What do you mean health? Like
Well,
fitness?
no, Chinese herbs.
Oh
So,
yeah, okay.
yeah. So my wife and I, we're right into the health and working out and all this good stuff. But
Hmm.
early 20s, invincible.
Yeah.
But let's just say um, that type of business isn't. I'm great to support it, and I believe in all health and nutrition and stuff like that. But for me, the welding end of it was always something that I needed to get back to. So I was fortunate enough that September 1990, I got an opportunity with Nichols Radke, which is now Acon Industrial. And I got a job in there as a metal trade working in their iron shop. So obviously structural steel.
Hmm.
And that's where things started to take off.
Okay, so now you're getting into the real steel. When you start getting into structural, start having the people looking over your shoulder that are not just your boss, but you got codes and standards, and you got tests, tickets, and qualifications. How did you feel about getting into this side of the welding industry? Did you welcome the extra pressure, the extra skill, and possibly the extra training that went with it?
The neat thing about getting this position was obviously you're working with your shears and your iron workers and all these different metal fabricating equipment.
Hmm.
Was the job that I had in BC. I was able to work on all that stuff previously. So even though the scale and the size of the work and the codes and standards were there, the understanding how to work with that equipment really excelled, because a lot of times welders would get hired on, but a lot of them didn't. They knew the welding end of it, but they didn't know any of the metal fabricating part of it. So
Right.
that really helped me, even though it was a starting point for me, obviously, because the metal trades is a division of the UA, not looked at the same. Um, but where I really wanted to go was piping. But I didn't realize the how much more skills were required and what needed to be done to get to there. So working as the metal trade in that shop, one of the big things that always came up was they always lose their good guys to the pipe side. So, I was wanted to be one of those good guys that was going to get the opportunity on the pipe side. And but they let me, you know, fail just like everybody else.
Hmm.
My first couple of CWB tests did not go the way I wanted, obviously.
Hmm.
But they came, right?
Yeah.
Um,
It always comes sooner or later if you just stay at it. And I wanna just let the listeners kind of hang on another piece of information you gave there that's important to know is the how it sets you up for success to learn the tools and the equipment in the shop you're in. Even if it's not your job, if you might just be hired to be a welder, but if you got any time or if you got a good boss, hopefully you do have a good boss. and they, allow you to go and work with the machinists or the mechanics or whoever and learn some of the other tools and equipment in the shop, the shear, the brake press, the iron worker. You get to learn how to use a milling machine or a lathe. Boy, do you get to be an important piece of the puzzle down the road. That's very important information to have.
You've got that right. Like, even to this day, in my future, on my previous job, um, as a welder, everybody complains that, oh, you're golden arm this or you're golden arm that. You know what? There's nothing wrong with having that skill set of being a welder, but we need to also understand that working with tools and equipment are all part of our trade as well. And there's nothing worse than obviously breaking equipment or working on equipment unsafely, because that's a big factor. Because I can tell you, I had a few incidents when I was younger too, and 90% of all the incidents I had coming up through the ranks was probably because I was trying to fit in and do too much, as opposed to working within our strengths and weaknesses, and not being afraid to ask for help.
That's a wonderful way to put it, and I remember just recently here at CWB, all these years later, now I'm an old man, and I was at the headquarters in Milton, and we were doing some work in there, and it was on a weekend, and it was like, oh, we need to get these plates milled. We're gonna have to call a machinist. I'm like, well, don't we have a milling machine back here? Yeah, we got a milling machine. Well, I know how to run it, and everyone stops and is shocked. It's like, you know how to run a milling machine? It's like, yeah, I used to have to run one of these dang things, and they're like, well, it's an old one. I'm like, well, that's even better because I only know the old one. So it was, this old machine, and it was like, and even now, like you don't even think I'm on the tools anymore, but there it is. It pops up. Somebody needs to run this X machine. I know how to do it, or at least, once you learn one, you kind of know them all because they have the same symbols, and you just go slow. Figure it out. Think about it. What does this do? At the end of the day, whether it's new or old, it does the same thing. So, okay, this is forward, this is backward. Okay, this is speed. Okay, I got it. All right, here we go.
Yeah. Yeah, just don't mill it.
Too much.
Come back the stroke going the wrong way. You kind of take off all the heads of the tooling.
Yeah,
Done
yeah.
that before.
Or you'll shoot them all in your face. Nothing like chips to the face.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. But there, that milling machine was a godsend when I purchased one of those at the training center when I was a training coordinator. And yeah, what a saving grace that is.
They sure
to
are.
know how to use that stuff.
Yeah. So here we are back in Kitchener. You you ventured into the entrepreneurial side with your business, and decided, what, I'm gonna get back into welding. You got back in the shop, iron working, structural work, and then you're thinking, okay, I want to get my skills up to get onto the pipe side that they keep talking about, where all the really good welders go. And I know, like, even when I was younger, I went down that same path, and started trying to think, because the dollars were better too. Like, let's not just talk about the skill level, but there's this idea that, oh, I'm working for a private company making pretty good money, good benefits, but then you can go work for these guys over here on this other side of the fence, and they make more money. They have a very structured apprenticeship program, which looks pretty cool. And you at that time when I was young, it was like $6 on the hour for pension, and I mean it's more now, but back then that was a ton of money. And that's what I was thinking. I'm gonna go make the big bucks with these guys. Were you thinking these same things? Like, I want the money, I want the prestige. Like, what was it that was pulling you towards you?
Well, money will always pull you to a certain degree.
Mhm.
It has to, right? Because that's what pays the bills.
Yeah.
I think for me, it took a little bit because obviously, being a metal trade, there's different rules and stuff within our organization. But being a part of the associate, being a part of the UA Local 527, what was great was they have a training center. They had a training center where, as a member, even though I was a metal trade, I was still a working member. So as long as I was still working for the employer, I had access to all the training programs. So what that allowed me to do was take every welding program that they offered. And I did that. So I worked for the structural side, I think, for 3 months only. But the welding instructor seen my skills,
Mhm.
And I asked him because the quickest way to get to the pipe side was to get a steam fitter apprenticeship.
Okay.
So, so I was taking welding classes with him, and I says to, and he was really a big mentor to me. His name was Wiley Elliott. But I said to him that, I would really like to get a steam fitter apprenticeship. And he's like, kid, you'll starve as a steam fitter, because this is 1990, 91. There's not much work out there at the time. And he says, with your skills as a welder, you stick to welding and you'll never be out of work. And so I took that at heart. I kept going to the programs, to the school, and they had an opening up on another division within Nichols Radke, and it was called Borzig Valve. And we manufactured ball valves for the pipeline.
Okay.
Anywhere from 2-inch to I don't know, like 48-inch, maybe it was the biggest. But they were looking for an all-position UT welder, and he said I was ready for that position if I wanted it. So I moved they're still all within the same facility, and I moved just down the hall to the other company, and became an all-position welder for them.
And then
So that's
this path now, you're welding all day, every day now. But you haven't gotten into any of the pressure stuff yet, have you?
not specifically the pressure stuff, but I was doing UT and RT work, but not
Yeah.
open root.
Okay. Now, what was your thoughts here? Were you officially a member of the hall? You're a paying member now, or were you still just a working member through a company?
So yeah, I'm still just I'm a member, but working member, because Borzig valve still fell under the metal trades agreement, and but I still was able to take all the schooling.
Perfect.
So I did that for 3 years.
Mhm.
They actually had me as a union steward, so they couldn't get rid of me. Yeah.
Who
But,
voluntold you for that job? Someone voluntold you for that
well,
one.
yeah, everybody else that I worked with that didn't want the position, right? You know how that goes.
Yeah.
Right. But great opportunity again, because working on in that side of things, we're manufacturing the ball valves. We're doing all that stuff at Borzig Valve, and then we're shipping the valves that we're building are actually now getting pump and coat for the pipeline within the plant down the next couple bays over by the pipe guys. So to see how this is all working and where all this stuff goes, it was quite neat to see.
So I think at this point in the interview, for the people that are listening and don't understand, and we have a lot of listeners from the US too that don't even have apprenticeship outside of unions. They don't even know what any of this is. We've talked about a few things that might seem like strange. First of all, we talk about the UA. We have working members and then the UA members. So what's the difference between being, a member of the hall, call outs, on the list type of worker, as opposed to a working member working under a shop? What's the distinction there?
So as a UA pipe welder or member, you work under the building trades. So that's the building trades. So construction building trades, ICI, plumbers, pipe fitters, steam fitters, sprinkler fitters, HVAC techs. The metal trades are basically a classification that can help you get to where you may want to go, or it's a classification that's maybe not apprenticeable, so to speak. Which it's not. It shouldn't be the case, because obviously you got the metal trade, metal fab trade, and but we had machinists. It's all the stuff that doesn't fall under the building trades.
Yeah.
So you could be machinist, you could be tool and dies, you could be maybe we had some iron workers that weren't necessarily within the building trades. Yeah. So that's how the metal trade sort of works. To me, it's a great opportunity for somebody to get their feet wet, and see if they want to get into apprenticeship. A metal trade could also be prep, kind of like a labor, gets material handling. That's another classification of metal trades. It's sort of everything that fits it doesn't fit within the building trades of the plumber, steam fitter, welder, pressure welder.
Yeah, and I know, like, I think 2 podcasts ago, we interviewed someone from the ironworkers and had to explain with the ironworkers that, there's structural, there's the connectors, there's the welders, there's all these different groups underneath the ironworkers that, you may be an ironworker your whole life and never weld, and
Right.
within the pipe fitter or the union hall, which is so many things. You said plumbers, pipe fitters, the steam fitters, the HVAC. Can that be the same thing? Could you forever be within, your union and not ever touch a welder, not be a welder at all? Or can you choose to be a part-time welder or a full-time welder? You know, do you have that ability to move around or to change up your work?
So obviously, I believe if you're a steam fitter or a plumber, you don't you're going to get exposed to welding no matter what.
Yeah.
If you're in the union, in the UA, all plumbers, steam fitters will get exposure to welding, which is usually mandatory within their JTC programs.
Yeah.
JTC stands for the Joint Apprenticeship Training Programs. That's usually how their apprenticeship works, but it's pretty much mandatory across. Now, if I'm in the US, so the US and Canada, even though they're the same, we're different.
Mhm.
So if I'm in the US, I'm a steam fitter and a welder, or I'm a
Okay.
plumber and a welder. You know, in Canada, we have, obviously with our provincial rules and regulations, welding is a standalone trade in Canada. In the US side, it falls within the trade classification of plumber, steam fitter.
Kind of gets swallowed up in there. Now, do you feel, and I'm not trying to say better or worse, but having that distinct classification for welding, yourself being a welder, do you find that that's beneficial in terms of training and knowledge, to have welding kind of be its own standalone?
That's
I'm throwing the hard balls at you here.
Yeah, I'm just going to give you my personal opinion.
Yeah, yeah,
So my personal opinion is because I've lived it. I truly believe that welding is a standalone trade, and I think as opposed to and I don't want anybody to take offense one way or the other, but whether you're a steam fitter that has welding skills, right, or you're a welder that has those other skills, you don't necessarily have to have your steam fitter ticket or your plumbing ticket, but all trades need to be able to work. It usually takes more than one person to do the job.
that's right.
So the more you understand both, whatever task that's being done, whether it's by a steam fitter welder, or a welder / pipe fitter, the skills go hand in hand, and you usually need more than one set of hands to get the job done. So it's good to know how to work together and understand each other's trades. Trying to do both, I think you can probably do both and be great at both. However, if you're 90% of the time you're fitting pipe, so to speak, and only 10% of the time you're welding, then you're probably not going to have the same welding skills as somebody that's doing it 90% or 100% of the time.
That's right.
Because that's just the way welding is. Welding, I think, is one of those trades where the more you're always doing it, I mean, obviously at our point, we get to a point where it's diminishing results because we can't see, right? But the skills are there, but it's just tougher to see as you get older.
It is, yeah.
But I think welding, it's not like it was back in the early days, and I say that like I'm an old man, but you look at the advancements of welding now compared to where they were, even in the 90s, right? Even in the 90s when I was coming through, there's just way more information. There was way more processes. There's stricter codes and standards, and the education side, and the demand of industry. We need to be better. We need to be competitive, right? So
That's right. Like I always tell young students, it's like, there's a lot of things in the world. There's a thing called the manufacturing triangle where you have speed, cost, and quality, right? And in Canada, we're not cheap. We're just not. We're not a cheap country. Our standard of living is high. Our wages are high. When you look at who we're competing against, so if we can't be cheap, we got to be fast and we got to be good. That's where we live. We live in being the best, and we live in getting a good quality. And don't think of speed in terms of making it fast. Rework is the killer of speed. you do it right. You want to talk about fast, you talk about no mistakes. Don't talk about going faster because walking the same path twice is the worst, right? So,
Oh, yeah, efficiency. Efficiency is the killer. That means the key,
mhm.
right? And confidence. Um, you know, not not doing double steps. Or one of the big things I learned early in my career was to, well, and I'm already a patient person, obviously, as my wife would attest to, but patience is a key in the trade. Because with welding, if you start to get upset about all the things that go wrong, you're going to be an angry person because there's not too many times stuff goes right. So you
Yeah.
got to stay calm, right? Stay calm and just, hey, what do I know? What can I do to do this, right? And
All right.
yeah, I can go on and on about that for sure.
All right, so let's get back on track now. So here you are, you're finally gonna make your break into the UA side. You're the steward for your shop. You're working under, for this company doing the ball bearings, ball valves, sorry. And you know, what what were the steps that came next, to because you went from being just on the edge of being involved to very involved, right? So what was the next steps there?
Well, there was actually another step in there again, Max,
Okay.
because in the UA we have a constitution, and it states that to become a journeyman member, you got to have 5 years in the piping industry. Okay, so here I'm a welder. I'm working for the metal trades, doing ball valves, right? Making ball valves, or in a manufacturing environment as an all-position welder, stick welder. With obviously there was some MIG and flux core and sub arc in there, but and a little bit of TIG for sure. But it didn't meet the
Criteria.
5 years
Yeah.
pressure piping.
Yeah.
So I was going to school for 3 years at the UA training center. So I was being taught the UA way, but I still didn't have 5 years experience. So I hit a few roadblocks trying to get my membership transferred over to building trades, which is, I get why it's there. And it's basically, I came up without an apprenticeship, but I did an apprenticeship. I can tell you that for sure. And but what had happened was Nichols Racky, the company I worked for, had purchased another manufacturing company.
Okay.
And that company was Solar Turbines that they purchased, and they brought it up from San Diego and brought it into Cambridge, and it's now known as IST, Innovative Steam Technologies. So they brought that company over, and it's a startup company. And I had went to my mentor Wiley, and I had went to him and said, my dad has offered me a position, or he's saying there's a foreman positions are coming up at the old seat manufacturing facility I was working for way back when, and they're looking for supervisors. And he looked at me like, and I'm telling you, I had hair down, like kind of like
Yeah, like me with my long hair. Yeah.
sure, absolutely,
Yeah.
right. And he's looking at me like, you as a supervisor, because I'm asking him for a recommendation. And I says, yeah, absolutely, and so he never thought, he just kind of gave me the look that he'd normally give you, right? Like, sure, kid. And I came in the next day with my hair all cut off, and he pulled me aside and he said, Ray, I'll give you that recommendation if you so desire. I think you're making a big mistake, leaving the organization and the opportunities. And but anyway, he said, I'll give you the recommendation. So I went. I took the recommendation. I went to the first interview with the previous company for the supervisory role, and he came back the next day and he says, Ray, I got an opportunity I need to talk to you about. And he says, they told me about the IST. They bought this company, and they want me to go run the welding side of it. And so that's now looking after all the chrome, nickel, ink canal, all the pipe. They're looking for someone to look after the pressure boundary. That's what we called it then.
Yeah.
And he says, I told him that I know this up and coming young welder with education, and I think he'll fit the bill. I think you should take him on as opposed to. I said he told the owner that he'd be there to help or guide or whatever, but he was too old in the tooth to be taking that role on. But he knew a guy, so that's what really started. I went over there and looked after the piping side of it, and got to learn the piping. My 5 years experience, so to speak, build on what I already had, so I could get to 5 years. But that was a real eye opener, because we were doing a lot of orbital welding, a lot of Inconel piping and tubing. The P22s and the P91s were coming out, doing a lot of that stuff. And not only was I a supervisor, but I was also the lead welder, plus the guy developing the procedures, working with the QC.
Pretty steep learning curve.
Well, sure. And I was I think I was 24 years old. So it was it was 3 tough years, I can tell you that.
So you get your 3 years in, coming up on, you're working towards this 5-year entry point, that you need to get, as soon as you hit that mark, were you see you later company, I'm off to work with these guys now, or, how did that flag fly?
Yeah. So it didn't quite work like that, because obviously, I'm working for the company, just a different division. So I've got over 6 years now with the organization. Still not called ACON at the time. I think it was BFC is what it was called then, maybe. But because it's all the same division, I was still able to, get some training here and there, and basically I come back from a job that I did in New Zealand. I worked in New Zealand for 2 months for the company. Worked a lot of 70, 80 hours a week, 100-hour weeks, just trying to do everything to startup company, right, in Canada.
Yeah.
And basically it got to a point was I said to my mentor, I'm like, why, I'm doing all the teaching here, but where's my support, right?
Burning out.
Without getting into the politics of things, I was trying to hire people to do piping, and this is, obviously it's trying to date the years in the mid 90s. Hire pipe guys for $16 an hour. Are you kidding me?
Not gonna happen.
It ain't happening,
no.
Right? And so I'm testing a lot of people, and I'm burning the bridges at both ends of the spectrum, trying to get work done for them and supervise and trying to hire people and train people. But the skills, it's just crazy how many people who said they were pipe welders that
clearly we're not.
We're never taught. We're all taught differently, right?
Yeah.
There's an acceptance criteria, and some people's acceptance criteria are a little bit lower. But even the companies was too low, because if you want good people, you gotta pay a little bit more, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know where to, but it was great for me because I made a ton of mistakes, and I was allowed to grow with the company, with them accepting somebody that was, maybe not a 20-year veteran.
Yeah,
right?
pretty young. To be 24 and thrown into that pot, that's a lot of trust, but it's also a lot of pressure. You're kind of being, they say trial by fire, but that's more like trial by pressure cooker. It's tough, and you might have all the skill in the world, but at that age, you don't have a lot of the coping mechanisms that you develop throughout a long career, in terms of even just knowing when to say no, or knowing when people need to just back off sometimes.
Yeah. There was a couple of Saturdays. The shift may have been unsupervised. Need a mental break day, but no, you know what? It was a really great experience to work there and do what I got to do, and like I said, I got to travel. They sent me places that I never dreamed that I'd get to. But at the end of the day, is being a pressure welder, in the late 90s, you know, and working for $18 an hour when I knew the pipe guys were probably making at the time 27, 28 plus pension.
Yeah.
You know, that's a big difference, right? It was a big difference. And to be honest, to me, that was like I'm working at the AHL and I want to go to the NHL.
Yeah.
You know, and that's exactly how it was. So, you know, I did spend my time in the minors to get to where I finally got to.
So then let's wrap up this first half of the show with you finally getting in to the hall. So now, you know, after this trek and the tribulations and the you know, from west to east, back to east, or east to west, back to east, and then this job, you finally were able to get into the hall. You know, did someone have to, you know, back you in, or how was that entrance process for you when you finally got through?
Yeah, so that entrance process still wasn't seamless. Lots of letters, right? And
Yeah.
obviously, I did lots of documentation so that I could show the international that I did have the experience to transfer over from journeyman metal trade to journeyman building trades. So, you know, there was still a process. And then, you know, the funny thing is even though they knew me internally, 3-4 years of schooling that I took with them at the Union Training Center, I had to come in and test just like everybody else. And so here's so for me working in a manufacturing, and I probably hadn't done a test now. Who knows? I couldn't remember the last time I did a test because my tickets always stayed valid as per ASME, and you know, so now I had to go take this test. I'm scheduled to test in front of our examining board, which were some of my former instructors. But today they're examiners. They're not my instructors.
Yeah,
right?
that's
Different
right.
hat,
They can't help you.
you know, and and obviously, I was still working as a supervisor at this job, and I was getting, you know, we had 2 shifts going, and I'm trying to get the second shift going, and I'm doing all these things. So, you know, I'm assuming I'm just going to go and do my test and everything's going to be hunky dory. But you know what? Some days the body doesn't work like others, you know. And so I went in to do my 2. I think there's a couple tests. One was a 6-inch F3, F4, and the 6G, and then I think there was a 2-inch TIG or something. I can't remember for sure. It's such long ago, but all I know is my test was okay, but it should have been a lot better.
Yeah.
And I was a little late getting there because I was trying to get a shift going. And the examiner, who was another mentor of mine at the time, he says to me, he says, "Ray, you need to get your priorities straight. Which path do you want to go on? Is it the path that you're already on, or you need to focus on the path that you're right? You should have been here on time." And you know, anyway, I made it through the test, but it sure wasn't the end of any repairs or faults by Ray Lemieux, I can tell you that. Right? Once you get to the NHL, you realize it's a little different.
You're just starting another path of learning, right? And just for and for the people that are listening, the F3, F4 is the open route, 6010 route, cellulose route with a hydrogen filling cap. So 7018, usually 6010, 7018. 6G in position, 45 degree, all doesn't move. Just the quick 5-second rundown of what that test looks like.
Yeah.
Try it in your garage sometime. She ain't an easy one.
Yeah, you know, and to be honest, it's probably you're in a test position. Everything's perfect, but the difference is you got to make sure your mind's ready, your body's working right, and the thing is I went to that test still thinking about my job that I was getting paid for, as opposed to my new career that I was trying to get to, and yeah. But anyway, you know, after the tongue lashing I received, it did pass the visual. I thought he was being a little harder on me than he needed to be, but that's okay. That's okay.
Once he starts pulling out the dental pick, you know he's just being mean. So
yeah, that's right. That's right.
All right. Well, this is a great time to take the break. We're right at the cusp of the new Ray Lemieux, and you know, talking about his career now with the UA. So right after this break from our sponsors, we'll be back here with the interview on the CWB Association podcast.
The CWB Association is new and improved and focused on you. We offer a free membership with lots of benefits to anyone interested in joining an association that is passionate about welding. We are committed to educating, informing, and connecting our workforce. Gain access to your free digital publication of the Weld magazine, free online training, conferences, and lots of giveaways. Reach out to your local CWB Association chapter today to connect with other welding professionals and share welding as a trade in your community. Build your career, stay informed, and support the Canadian welding industry. Join today and learn more at cwbassociation.org.
And we are back on the CWB Association podcast. I'm Max Ceron. I'm here with Ray Lemieux from UA Canada, who we've been talking about his career of getting into the hall, which, you know, is very much the story of many people. Lots of times people think that you just come out of high school and you just get into a hall and off you go to your merry journey. And that's generally not the path it takes to work your way into any of the unions. There's usually a little bit of field time, you know, like you said, being in the AHL and the minor leagues and working. And, you know, I don't want to make people think that that's somehow lesser greater. I don't like talking about the industry in terms of better or worse, but there is certain different skill sets that are required for certain jobs. And the UA definitely is looking for certain welding skill sets, you know, that are specific to the piping and industry that they support. Now, Ray, you are now in, you know, you got in heck, let's say, for not having your priorities straight, and they said, "All right, Ray, which one is it going to be? Is it going to be left or is it going to be right?" And did you choose at that moment, or was it still a little bit of on the fence in terms of what you wanted to do?
Oh no, I was totally all in. Obviously, I passed my tests and I gave my resignation to the other division. And but here's the kicker. So you're building trades, and now even though I'm moving my classification from metal trades to building trades, I now have to go on the unemployment list,
Mm-hmm.
and then I got to get a call for a job.
And it's going to be the same
Right,
company
so-
you just left.
Well, that's the hope, right? Obviously, that was the hope that that I'm going to get the call from the higher division. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
and but you know, it still works. It still worked as I got to go on. I'm working now for the hall,
Yeah.
and so I put my name on the books, and obviously I got a call right away. But you know, back then there was lots of pipeline work that we were doing within the fabrication shop,
Mm-hmm.
and it was basically it was like 7/12s for 6 weeks, and then you know the job's done.
Yeah.
And then there's a layoff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, new guy coming in on the totem pole. You know, I'm basically one month into this, 6 weeks in, and things went well the first 6 weeks, but then I got laid off for 6 weeks, and you know, which was great. You know, I could use the break anyway because you know I've just spent the last 6 years of my life working pretty steady and you know, lots of hours and traveling and different things. So I like the 6 week break, but you know, then we went back again. Now the call came back in. Obviously, the job got started because there was no work, right? Or there was no material.
Mm-hmm.
Material come back in. We worked another 6 weeks, 7/12s, you know, and so then I got laid off again, and this time one of our Acon's competitors from a different locale in Hamilton, they called me up and tried to name hire me as a travel card. Well, that didn't go over too well with either local, my home local or Hamilton. But you know, the thing is, you know, fast track that is that, you know, I'm now there. I made a ton of mistakes, Max, like you wouldn't believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I shouldn't say mistakes. I had some welding repair rates that weren't acceptable. But 90% of those repair rates that I had was me trying to work too hard and you know, trying to keep up, so to speak, or whatever. Bad decision making, using the wrong diameter of electrode for the work you're doing. You know, too much deposit. You know, having porosity, different minor minor things that you see like you see in the
That
industry.
are correctable 100% if you just would have stopped for a second.
Exactly. And but hey, the good thing about that is, like I tell all the young people that I've got to meet over the years, is nobody made more mistakes than I did. But the key is to remember them and not let them happen again. Right.
Yeah.
And because there's too many people in the industry that are great welders, but they've been making the same mistakes for 50 years. And I don't get it.
No, it's
Right.
tough, but everyone hammers out their own career, and you see where people top out. Sometimes people hit their ceiling, and you see when someone hits their ceiling, and sometimes people will want to blame someone else on the ceiling. Oh, they're not letting me climb above this, or they're not letting me get above this. But what I've learned in my 30 years in the industry is that you make your own ceiling, and if you are topped out, it's your own mistakes that are putting that lid on your own box. No one's putting that lid on you.
Yeah, and that's being open-minded, right?
Yeah.
Open-minded. For me, I credit my success for basically 3 mentors, maybe 4 in my career, that really helped guide me. But everybody I met in the industry has guided me.
Mhm.
Everybody, one way or another, I picked up either a do and don't, or just whether it be safety or decision making, working with people. Like, everybody in the industry has taught me something.
Yeah.
And what I've tried to always do with that knowledge is to give back, because that's somebody taught me, and that's why I got successful. I believe that,
Hmm.
but it's also because I had a passion for it.
Yeah. All right. So let's fast forward, because I'm sure we could make 7 episodes. I'm sure we could. Yeah, in between that, a couple of old guys start talking about the trades. You know what it's like. If we had a beer in front of us, we'd be here all night. But let's you get in, you're welding now, but now in your position today as the head of training for the UA, and this hat that you wear, that's fairly large hat. You know, that climb within your union to from welder to, I'm sure, being one of the better welders or a lead hand or a GF, and did you have to go through all the steps like everyone else? And when did you get that first bug for teaching?
I got the first bug for teaching. Well, I think my first position when I went over to IST as a supervisor,
Mm-hmm.
my teaching career started right then.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah.
Because we had a new division. I was looking after all the orbital. There was a lot of it was well, big diverse company, so to speak. So we had a lot of women that worked in the industry that were the orbital welders.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of them didn't have welding as a background, but I taught them how to do orbital welding, and so I worked with a lot of people there so learning, the welding trade, with the orbital, and then working as a supervisor and trying to hire pipe welders. So teaching, some of those people, but when, so that got me exposed to it. But when I came back to BFC at the time, and I was working as a welder, I had a brother that was coming up as a metal trade, and he was working in the blast barn. So I was working with him on Saturdays. Every Saturday that we didn't work overtime, he was in the shop, and I was teaching him about how to weld. Him and his buddy, and we were on. We'd get out some 30-inch pipe and 24-inch pipe. I'd have the 2 of them on each side of the pipe, and I'd be trying to teach them how to weld pipe, and get them exposed to working together and listening to their equipment.
Yeah.
And how to turn up the machine as they're going up the pipe, and so that's when I really got the bug into it. And obviously, and because the school did so much for me, I wanted to give back to the school, and that's where my teaching side went. I just had to wait for my mentors to retire so I could get a job with the teaching side.
And is that what happened? As they retired, you were like, this position came up. At this point, you've been in the hall a few years, and you put your name in and said, okay, look, I wanna be the next in line to get in front of students in the training hall.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened. A couple of the senior instructors had retired, and an opportunity opened up, and I did apply, and with ACON being, such a big employer of our local Kitchener-Waterloo at the time, it created a lot of the instructors that come from that facility because of our, exposure to every process. Almost anything you're going to see in the industry, it came through ACON shop. So that did open the doors for me to become an instructor.
And then once you got your toehold in the instructing world, that's a whole different career. I remember when I first got, I never thought about teaching until I became a teacher. And then when I got that call from the college being like, hey, I had been in there for a number of different reasons over the years, and I got a call from the program head being like, have you ever thought about teaching? I was like, well, not really, but I'm willing to try it out. It started a whole nother learning curve of events that I had not really thought about in terms of welding, because teaching people to weld on the floor in a shop is different than having a class of 12 in a classroom sitting down. And you got to look at things a lot differently, and even just the way people learn is very different. What was this learning curve for you now as a trainer, where you're, now you're working with apprenticeship, you're working with rules, you're working with guides, outcomes, the whole spiel, right?
Yeah. So because our structure was night school,
Mm-hmm.
so I still had my job at ACON, and I think I believe I was a supervisor, I was a supervisor then. ACON allowed me to. I was working night shift. They allowed me to take the time off. I leave 3 hours on a Tuesday. I think we taught Tuesdays and Thursdays. They allowed me to go and go teach. Right. It helped a lot of the people that was working for them anyway.
Yep.
But the thing about in the welding shop, like you said, you got different skills. Some people want to be there. Some people are mandatory; they have to be there. It's tough, and some people, have natural ability, and some just through depth perception or whatever. It's not for them. Welding's not for them. But I don't know how to say. You do the best to relate to people, whatever works for them, is what I try to do. And cracking jokes.
Seems to have worked out for y'all, right?
Yeah. Hold her hand, whatever. I don't know. I think, I was good at it because I related to everybody, and I believe, and I came across as, like I said, nobody made more mistakes than me, Max, coming up. So, I was still very humble and honored to be able to be in front of them to help them. So.
Yeah. And then what about this transition into the management side? When you start moving into now the management tiers of your organization, again, another big learning curve, especially for guys like us. I know that I have these struggles to this day. I learned from the floor up, and sometimes at these upper levels, the people that you're around don't have those welding experiences, don't have that floor experience, those trades experiences. They come from a completely different background, and it's difficult to communicate sometimes. And have you had any of these issues, or do you, how has been this job now in terms of this national scope that you have?
So on the national scope, I think what helped me with the national scope was moving from the tools, so to speak, when I became the training director of my home local. And, moving from, the building trades, the shop, organizing work, supervising lots of people, to now running a school. Well, it's like doing a job.
Yeah.
You got to plan the job. You got to get the materials. You got to get the help. You got to get your instruct. You got to put the team together, and you got to make sure you have everything planned out and documented. And that's basically, taking all that shop experience and the stuff that we do every day for granted in industry, and just transfer maybe to paper or to structure, to spreadsheets, to Word documents, to, communication. It's just, oh my goodness, where does it end, right? And then try to, obviously, become a better typer. But But it still can't prepare you for the role that I have now, because, even when I talk to people across Canada, unfortunately, if I'm from BC, that's my focus. If I'm from Alberta, my focus is Alberta. If I'm from, Ontario and so forth. So when the Atlantic region people need to travel to Alberta, they know how the system works in Alberta because they've been doing it for years, because that's their lifestyle and stuff like that. But now when you start to see, people need to come to Ontario, or people need to go to BC, or to try and navigate all these different rules and regulations and how it works in each province, especially for pressure welding, it gets to be a bit of a
It's tough, man.
redundant and stressful and basically unnecessary.
Yeah, like even the terminology from B pressure to initial 6 to what, level C plus or whatever new thing they have in BC now, like it changes. And you've been on harmonization committees. I've been on harmonization committees, and at the end of all these committees and all these millions of dollars, we're not one step closer to being harmonized ever. It's from province to province, it's all over the place. And I know that at CWB, we're working right now on a project to try to we're not trying to fix anything, because you can't. It's every jurisdiction has their own deal. You can't tell them what to do, but at least try to make a map of some kind that says, hey, if you're here, this is the words they use and this is what you need. If you're ABSA or TSSA or TSASC or whoever, these are the documents. This is where you go. This is the cost. But man, it is kind of a mess when you try to communicate between every province.
Yeah, I think the communication line is open, but obviously, we always want to blame somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah.
I think, we have outdated regulations that need to be updated. And until lots of, and I know that the chief boiler inspectors across the country, that they work within their system, and they have to work to their system. I mean, that's the way it works, right? They don't make the rules. They follow and guide them just like we all do.
Yep.
Right. And there's a lot of stuff that needs to be updated, and I think they're working on it. I can tell you that I meet with them, not as much as I'd like, but every time I do, they know where I feel about it, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, they're about public safety.
Yeah.
And they understand, but they have to work within their systems. And the other thing is that it's not even the rules and regs that hurt you. It's the trust, of whether it's the contractors or codes do allow. There is exceptions to certain things, and there is allowances that can speed up the process. But for me, where I really tried to focus my time is on a development process and try to open the doors on the development, because I talk to my friends in Saskatchewan, and the way the rules work in Saskatchewan, it's tough for a young person to enter into the piping business. Well, let's figure out how we get those doors open for them, because I've been to too many skills events, and I see the talent at Skills Canada, these young people that are coming through the trades that want to be in this trade, and I see a ton of skills. But what happens is they could go to, say, the piping side, or they could go to the millwright side, they go to the metal fab side, or wherever they want to go. But because their options are locked. I mean, it's tough to navigate that stream. Yeah. If you're lucky to get that right fish to jump up the water's up the right high enough, and you can get up the bridge or the ladder, then it's good. But for a lot of them, we're all fighting for the same talent.
Yeah,
right? All these different trades are fighting for the same talent,
and they'll get swallowed up by the big fish right off the top. And usually those big fish, they want to hold on. They don't want to let you go off and do your other thing. So like me and you, we were just in Vancouver for skills, and I got to mentor a Canadian skills champ, Adam Sebastian, who now works for the UA. He's here in Saskatchewan. He joined the hall and he's working at Balzers and he's welding pipe every day. So, but his path, you know, for being the best welder in Canada 2 years in a row, winning these competitions all over the world, he got swallowed up by a manufacturing company immediately because he couldn't get into the top tier stuff. It was too hard. Like you said, it was too confusing. It was too difficult. There wasn't the right processes. And I didn't know how to mentor him through that. So, just get out there and work, kid, because you got to work. And he did. And because he's obviously not lazy. These skills kids, they're not lazy. They put in a lot of hours on their own time. So he got out there and he worked his butt and he ended up where he wanted to be. But it was a frustrating few years I watched from the outside, watching him try to figure out, because he was an amazing welder, but he was, and I should say on the other side of the coin, if I have to step back and look at this, he still has to put in his time, like all of us. And he still has to get out there. And he did the manufacturing gig that he hated. But you know what? That's life. I did manufacturing for years. I didn't hate it. I definitely knew it's not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. But I took it as a learning lesson and moved on, right? It is what it is. So on one side, I think these kids aren't getting the support. And on the other side, I think, well, maybe they just got to put the time in. I know it's tricky, Ray. I'm not sure how to look at it.
Yeah, well, I think, if you just listen to what we've talked about for the last hour,
Yeah.
and I had to put in my time, and I hate to be the person to say and I just look at what way things were in Ontario. So a young person, could go off to college, right? Or they maybe go off to, a private career school, right? Take a 12-week course, maybe spend $20,000 to learn how to do some piping. Unfortunately, you can't become a pressure welder in 12 weeks. You can sure as heck learn some skills to know whether or not you're going to be successful in the trade. But in 12 weeks, doesn't create a journey person.
No.
So where do you fit in? Where do you fit in if there's no apprenticeship opportunities? Where do you fit in if your jurisdiction that you work and live in says that you have to prove? They don't have a constitution, but they have regulations that say you got to have 3 years experience or 4 years experience to do, right? So whether it's manufacturing, whether it's, working into non-coded stuff, it doesn't matter. All that will help you in the end. And it's a process. It's definitely a journey. But I'm definitely trying to create openings, by talking with contractors, talking with clients, and letting them know that it's very important, if they want to quit complaining about the lack of people in the industry, then you need to help.
That's right.
You have to be part of the solution. And we've got some things that we're working on here in Ontario. And if they come through, we're taking it by province. So we've done some things on the East Coast that have been successful with the development of apprentices, and showing them that we can develop pressure welders in a short period of time, but it takes that tripartite.
Yeah.
Right. Clients, owners, and contractors have to be a part of that process.
I'm going to be down in FabTech in a couple of weeks, and that's the talk I'm doing is about apprenticeship, and I'm doing it from the outside of apprenticeship. I'm not an apprenticeship employee. I got my red seals, but after the fact, I was private industry. I kind of did everything the hardest way possible, and then, and now on the other side of the fence, I can say that, even if you're a company and you don't have apprenticeship, you don't have a union, that doesn't mean you abandon the idea. That doesn't mean you just walk away from this idea. You still got to have mentors on the floor. You still have to have a training process. You still need to have pathways for people to succeed. You can't just throw people, it's like just throwing a bunch of salt on the ground and hoping, a cake comes out of it. It doesn't happen like that. You gotta have a path for these things to come together, or else you're not going to succeed for the exact people. Everyone's talking about the skills gap and the mentor gap. Okay, sure, but you're telling me that the schools are going to fix this? That's not it. That's not the be all. The companies have to be involved. It's your responsibility to own your own talent. I'm not going up to the Boston Bruins and yelling at them for why aren't they putting enough money into the high school in my city to get the next NHL star. No, it doesn't work like that. Like you got to have each level put their piece in to make it work. And industry's got to put their piece in too, right?
That's right. And I think the big thing in Ontario was, Ontario's been a big manufacturing province.
Mhm.
And I get it. I get it. Everybody's fighting for people. If you get a good person, you don't want them to leave or move on. But you know what? If you create a proper, I wouldn't say development, but if you show pathways, and people can improve and get better and maybe move on to different opportunities, there is nothing wrong with that. Because if you have a proper pathway, there will be somebody to come in behind them to take those positions.
That's right.
And they shouldn't move, they shouldn't be able to miss a beat, and whether you're union or non-union, I'm not going to get into that. I just believe that, opportunity has to be there, and it has to be an affordable opportunity.
That's right.
Right. And there's nothing against businesses making money and doing their thing. Listen, I don't think there's a more expensive trade to develop than welders, just because of the equipment, the materials, and all that different stuff that's required to teach welding. But we need those jobs. I mean, to say that we don't have the skilled people, we have a ton of skilled people that just needed to be developed and have the doors open.
That's right. And I worked for one of the biggest manufacturing companies in the West, Brandt Industries. Brandt Industries gets a lot of bad raps because they're non-coded. They have very minimal CWB, just what they need for insurance purposes. They ride the manufacturing bubble as like many companies do. But they're not afraid to invest in their own talent, and that's one of the things that when I left, like you said, people, I trained, Brandt brought me up. They put me through training. They put me through management training. They actually opened the door for me to get into management, which is how I got to where I am today. And as I climbed the ranks, I brought up my crew with me. The day I decided to leave, and they let me go teach, they let me go do my shift work. They let me do substitute. They let me do all these things because I already had the next people in line. If I wasn't there, the next guy was just step up. And he knew exactly my role and what I needed to do. And the day I decided to pull the plug, Brandt sat me down and said, look, you got to pick. You going to go teach or are you going to work here? Because it's getting too tough. I said, I'm going to go teach. They said, okay, let your guy know next Monday it's his show. And I did. And you know what? From that day forward, as I went off to college, as I went off to teach, and as I went off to do these things, I brought so many people to Brandt because they treated me well. And so I was, there's a lot of people out there hating on Brandt, but not me. They gave me great opportunities, and it was a proper stream, and it was they did it right for me. And so I promote them. And that's the network. That's the thing that people don't seem to understand about the welding network across Canada, the world. You do right, you do good work, and you support, it comes back. It comes back, and you help push that. So when I was in school, I would bring Brandt in, and we'd hire right out of the school. Brandt would no kid went without a job. Those are the relationships you start to develop. And they knew that these kids got trained by Max. I worked there. I know the systems. So these kids were already kind of prepped. This is what you'll be doing. This is how it works. You got to be on time. You can't cut your brakes long. They're kind of, these are the rules of manufacturing. Like, and it's exactly to your point, is having industry be part of the development cycle, not just waiting to receive the developed workers, but you got to be part of that development cycle.
Yeah, and and you're 100% correct, Max, because here's the other side of it. You could have everybody that has this piece of paper that says they're all this and all that. But I can tell you, of all the apprenticeship meetings or the PAC meetings or the different meetings and how industry, what they say, they don't care about that piece of paper. They want the proofs in the pudding when you actually start doing the work. Mm-hmm. And no other trade gets scrutinized more than welding under that fact. Now you do have to have your ducks in a row on the paper trail when you're applying for a position. And I'm firsthand. Yeah, I'm I can do all these processes. Do you have a welding ticket? No, because I didn't work for a company that had tickets right at the time. But tickets are one thing. meeting above and beyond codes and standards.
Yeah.
And understanding that, welding, it's like, when you look at these artists, and I have so much respect for these metal sculpture people that can not only just create and have the idea of those things that they create, but actually then do it, right? Not just with welding, but it just blows me away how the talent that some of these people have. But they, that's because you got to take that consideration. This is a career. It's not just a trade. It's a career choice, and it's up to you to take things. If you need to do some research, do some research. If you need to do something on your own time, do something on your own time, whether it be practice or whatever. When you asked me a question there before, and I probably didn't answer very well, but some of the learning curve, back when a Pentium 486 was the computer, or Pentium 75, and I think I was on dial-up internet, as we all had at the beginning, and it would take you 2 hours for the search engine to try and find something. But I wasted a lot of time trying to find out about welding procedures and learning about welding consumables and actually trying to help my company, on the engineering side on what we should be looking at buying, right? But doing things on your own time. If it's a career, look at it as a career, right?
Yeah, treat it like a career. Yeah.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, Ray, I think they always tell me to try to keep them under an hour. We're well past that. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, that's awesome. And this was fantastic. I love it. And I think the audience is going to love it. As we end this off, a couple things I want to ask. First of all, how do people join? How do they look into it? How do they find out more about your union and where they can find information for it?
Our website's under construction, but if you're interested in joining the UA, every province or territory that you may work, or even in your city, Google UA local, or United Association. UA Canada is ours, where you can find some information. You can contact me, Ray Lemieux, at ray.lemieux@uacanada.ca. I'd help anybody or steer them in the right direction. We as a training team help all our locals. So if you get in contact with UA Canada, you can contact your local union in your area, whether it's in British Columbia, Alberta, or whatever. We have over 30 different training centers across Canada. Network of 56,000 members. And, all our training centers are open. The doors are open looking for people. I think everywhere across Canada right now is looking for people.
Yeah, they sure are.
Yeah,
awesome.
Everywhere.
Well, thank you. And then for the last question, something I ask all my guests, and I think I really love to hear it from you as having such a great career, is if you could go back and time warp in front of your young self, you're 17 coming out of high school and you have this welding career that you think you want to embark on. What piece of advice would you give yourself at 17, 18 years old coming out of high school, knowing what you know now?
Take it a little bit more seriously. I think, I think when I was 17 years old, there's that fine line of being confident, cocky, confident. I think, you got to stay humble, right? The trades have so much to offer, and no matter how educated you are coming through high school, there's a ton of things to learn, and you need to stay humble and not be too opinionated because you believe you know everything already, and without being, sound like a broken record, right? Because I'm sure everybody can say the same thing. Hindsight is 20/20. But that's for me. I know that I'd made mistakes coming up through the ranks because I didn't think about the big picture, that there's more to everything, right? There's just so much to learn. Give it your best, give it your all, and stay dedicated. Obviously, I did move around a little bit there when I was younger, but if you have to move around, don't be afraid of it, because
it's fun.
It's a big world. It's okay. It's okay. I got to see a ton of stuff. And I won't forget any of that. So don't be afraid. Like I know I've talked to some of the parents, and I talked to them about the construction and different things, that it is up and down, and you do have to move, or you could have to work remotely or whatever. Oh, gee, I don't know if I want to go. Well, it's not for everybody, but it's
You won't
nothing
regret
like
it.
having. Well, yeah, it's a big country. Go see it, right? Go see it, right? As long as you can afford to live where you're living, right? But take the chance, right? Take a chance on yourself and see it, and be a part of something. But just stay humble for sure.
Awesome.
Right?
Well, thanks, Ray, and I really appreciate it. I'm sure I'll see you in the next couple months here. I don't know if you're going to be down at FabTech, or I'm going to a skills thing next week in Saskatoon. I don't know if you're going to be a part of any of that stuff, but we'll run into each other soon anyways.
Yeah, next week I'm in the lovely city of Winnipeg. So that's my skills adventure for next week. So I'll be in Winnipeg, doing some planning for Skills Canada 2023.
Nationals. Yeah, I'll be there one way or another. I'll be there. It'll be fun. I wish I was there in the NTC or in the mentorship role with a welder. I miss those days, but now I'm there with CWB, so it's a little bit different. So
before we close, just one thing. We were doing the harmonization for the Red Seal right now. We're working on it, and mentoring is getting brought into the RSOS. And when I think about my career coming up, I got to do a lot of mentoring as a young person, and I believe it needs to be involved, because I'll tell you, that's how I learned a lot about welding, by trying to teach it. Because when you're trying to teach it and mentor it, you're reinforcing all the things that you're supposed to remember. And it's like, so it really helps you with your own skills, right? It really helps you with your own skills. It really does. So anyway, thanks, Max, for having me on.
That's a great point. And yeah, thank you for being here, Ray. I really appreciate the time. For all the people that have been listening, make sure you follow up and go check out the UA websites. They got lots of cool stuff going on. I had the privilege when I was younger of doing a couple travel cards with them when they needed a stainless welder out here in the West. And it was great work, although I didn't last very long because I wasn't fast enough. But we'll talk about that some other day. And but check out the podcast, keep it up, keep sharing, downloading, and liking everything that we're doing. I really appreciate all the people that have been following. Stay tuned.
We hope you enjoyed the show.